The trade deadline has come and gone. The Cincinnati Bengals made one in-season player trade. Let's break it down.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. We're the Locked On Bengals podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. We're on YouTube. We're everywhere you get your podcast. Shout out to the everydayers. Welcome back to another episode. We're going to revisit some of the topics we talked about in the what should they do at the trade deadline conversation yesterday and talk about what they did do and the path they took and all of the different implications tied up there. I'm Jake Liscow. He's James Rapien. I don't remember if I already said that. We are your hosts of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Today's episode brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code lowercase LockedOnNFL to get $50 instantly when you play $5. And the one move the Bengals made, James, was adding Bears running back, or former Bears running back now, Khalil Herbert. And it's a position where they needed help. We talked about running back as an option. We talked about Khalil Herbert specifically as an option. Justin Mello wrote about him as well for the Draft Network yesterday. A lot of people were thinking about running back for the Bengals and Khalil Herbert specifically, and that is the move the Bengals make, trading away a 7th-round pick for running back help.
Makes sense. Makes a ton of sense. We discussed how injuries impact things, and the Zach Moss injury was significant, and their running back depth was the worst in the NFL behind Zach Moss and Chase Brown. It just was. We talked about it months and months and months ago. And so that's what happened is I think running back vaulted to probably the top or near the top of their list. And you get a guy in Khalil Herbert. And these are the type of trades that I love, that we've been trying to will them to do always, that we will have a discussion about when it comes to other positions here in just a few minutes. You're talking about a guy that has clearly proven himself in the league, averaging 4.8 yards per carry throughout his career. Just got lost in the shuffle this year in Chicago. They obviously went out and paid a running back in free agency, and he's 8 carries total. So 1, he's fresh, but 2, he's proven it 3 straight years. I mean, he's been a piece of that Bears offense. He can catch passes out of the backfield, and he's going to be a free agent this offseason. And this is the final point here. Because when you talk about giving up draft assets, well, that's fine. You give up a 7th-round pick to get him, and you have him for the rest of this season. But then when he goes and signs elsewhere, he's probably going to help your compensatory pick formula. And that element of it is a factor. And that's why these late-round picks for players that are proven, like a Khalil Herbert, someone that should be a good fit in this offense, I think, and be a good complement to Chase Brown. And if you need him to run it 15 times in a given week, I think he can do that. And I like this trade a lot, and I was pleasantly surprised this morning. I think it was before 8 a.m. or right around then, maybe 8:30 in the morning or so, Eastern time, when that news broke.
Definitely well before I woke up here on the West Coast. Khalil Herbert is a move that, like you said, is a good move for the Cincinnati Bengals. He adds quality depth to that room. If he does his job well, you talk about him leaving and potentially them getting a compensatory pick back. Maybe they even are interested in extending him after this year. Never say never. It's
Sure.
possible that he provides them the kind of juice they're looking for a complimentary back for Chase Brown. And that's what he has been in his career when he's been with the Bears, when he's been productive for 3 years. He's been a complimentary back, never taking bell cow kind of snaps, never taking bell cow kind of touches, but an efficient player when he does have opportunities to carry the ball, good at making guys miss. The elusiveness is there, the natural leverage to fall forward at the point of contact to get that extra yard is there with Herbert. You like that. Notably, more effective runner in the zone game than the gap game, or at least he was with the Bears. The Bengals have been going away from the zone a little bit, like as an overall trend this year, but perhaps with the injury to Eric All, a sign that they need to get back to that zone game a little bit. And Herbert certainly has comfortable in that part of the running playbook. And I think, and I asked our Locked On Bears host Lauren Cox about this, that he didn't really ever find a significant role as a pass catcher with the Bears, but Lauren said, I always felt like he could contribute more there in the passing game, but wasn't given many opportunities. So an opportunity in Cincinnati, perhaps for him to find a role as a receiving back where, yes, Chase Brown has all of that explosiveness, but something they really, I would say, have missed from the departure of Joe Mixon, more than probably anything else they miss about Joe Mixon, is that I think that his ability to create as a receiver, as a check down player, is something that they haven't quite replicated with Zach Moss and with Chase Brown at this point. Notwithstanding that Chase Brown had an awesome scramble drill touchdown where he was improvising off of being a check down option against the Raiders. And that was a great play for Chase Brown, and he can continue to take strides in that direction. The other element here with Herbert, who I think we can all agree, and I think it's fairly unanimous, that he's got good vision, he's got good speed, he's a talented runner, he shows that wiggle that you like to see. The other big question in the Bengals offense is pass protection ability, right? And it's something where, you go look at the PFF grades, he looks like he's probably average to below average there. But when you ask people who have been covering the Bears, it's interesting what Joe Burrow had to say about it, because when you ask people who've been covering the Bears, pass pro has been bad, is what Lauren said. Maybe the single biggest reason he wasn't seeing the field. So it could be a mental thing for Herbert, right? Where when they're asking him to do the basics, he's able to do it because he's a compact body. He's a pretty strong guy. He can make those blocks when he's in the right position, but it's just a matter of getting into the right position. And the Bears didn't trust him to do that. We'll see how that develops with the Bengals, because Joe Burrow, contrary to what Lauren told me, who's been covering the Bears, said that he's heard that Herbert's a pretty good pass protector. And we'll hope that Joe Burrow is right on this one.
Yeah. Well, let's start here. They had a Justin Fields offense. So, of course, he didn't catch the ball. All right. They haven't been able to throw the ball in Chicago in a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, whatever it's been. I mean, they haven't. So, catching 20 balls in a Chicago offense, which he did do, is like catching 40 in Cincinnati. It just is. I was shocked. I was surprised. I was like, man, Justin Fields offense, you caught 20 passes. Like that's so. Yeah, I think he'll be okay there. The pass protection part of it, I just wonder if he can get it down quickly enough. And the Thursday night element, I do think that he has a shot to be active. Was in meetings on Tuesday. He was potentially going to talk to the media and didn't, because he was meeting with coaches and trying to get things down. I think he could have a role, but I don't think he's going to pass protect on Thursday against the Ravens. But then you have the longer layoff to get things down before that matchup against the Chargers. So he's going to have some time here, I think, to get things digested. And the other thing I like about Herbert, he probably, and he tweeted this, he was like, "Thank you, God, Houday." And when the report came out, I think it was Ian Rappaport it was Tom Pelissero, NFL Network. His representatives were certainly trying to find him a new home. And I'm sure when the Zach Moss injury happened, they're like, all right, let's get our client the heck out of here in a contract here where he can show what he can do. So you're talking about a young, in his prime, fresh, hungry running back, and you need that. Right? And so hopefully he does give them a little juice, a little oomph, and who knows, maybe gives them a little pass protection as well. But I really don't know how you can't like this trade in a vacuum for the Bengals. It makes them better. It gives them another weapon that I do think will be a weapon on the ground and hopefully through the air. And obviously the pass protection element is something that we're going to talk about with every running back that comes through here, as long as Joe Burrow's quarterback.
Well, and that's what Zach Moss's primary role was going toward with this team this year, with the way that Chase Brown was trending as a ball carrier. The last note on Khalil Herbert for me, James, is kickoff return experience, a place where they are a little bit thin right now. Charlie Jones banged up. And when Chase Brown is your only running back, well, they might need some bodies back there in the kick return game. Herbert hasn't done a ton of it since 2021. He did a little bit in 2022, has a couple of kick returns this year, but does have experience there as well. And
it's the new kickoff. It's the new kickoff too. So.
Right. And only 2 returns in the new rules this year in 2024. So we'll see if he can find a role there, where Zach Taylor earlier this week was asked about kickoff return and said that all options were open. They had Kendrick Pryor as a practice squad call-up back there last week. They did add the running back. They did not make the moves we were talking about on the defensive side of the ball, James. And we'll dive into that conversation, what they didn't get done, coming up next. This episode of Locked On Bengals is sponsored by our great partner. We told you about them last year, Ultimate Pro Football GM. They're back. They've added an amazing new game mode that we're going to tell you about. They have you step into, instead of the shoes of a football GM, you can now be a head coach in head coaching mode. So on top of getting to build your dynasty by drafting players, signing free agents, and hiring a coaching staff, you now get to also call your offensive plays during games. You'll get to check out the new tools that you can work with, such as individual training camps and an upgraded negotiation system that make it more fun, more realistic, and so much better than it was if you tried it before. If you haven't already installed it, do an update and you can try out the new, if you have already installed it, you can do an update to try out the new mode. If you haven't, you can get it right now. And for Locked On fans, for you, the Locked On Bengals listener, you can use promo code Locked On NFL in all caps in the game store, and you'll get a free boost to your franchise. So check it out. Just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up in the App Store. Ultimate Pro Football GM. Start your dynasty today.
Today's show is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the fantasy app that you need because it's daily fantasy the way you should be and the way it should be. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, don't delay to get the Prize Picks because the Bengals are on Thursday Night Football this week, and it's a perfect time to get in on the action with Prize Picks, where you can pick 2 players, 4 players. Maybe you think Derrick Henry is going to run all over the Bengals. Well, what you do is you pick more than or less than on the Prize Picks projection. So you could pick Derrick Henry rushing yards for more than or less than. You could go Jamar Chase receiving yards, Joe Burrow receiving or passing yards rather, and you combine those together, you can win up to 100 times your money. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the Prize Picks app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game.
The Bengals add Khalil Herbert, which doesn't preclude them from making other moves. Last time I checked the NFL rules, you're allowed to make multiple trades at any point on any given day. Certainly on trade deadline day, the Pittsburgh Steelers an example of this, making 2 moves to add a receiver and an edge rusher, Preston Smith and Mike
Williams.
The
most common name in the world.
I was thinking of Mike Davis for some reason.
The running back?
I got stuck. Yeah, look, man, we don't need to talk about names again. The Bengals made 1 move, however, they could have made more than 1 move. And there's a couple things here, and we'll get into the Bengals aspect of it more specifically, but I just want to vent for like 20 seconds really quick about how dumb NFL teams are about holding on to veterans on expiring contracts in hopeless situations. I'm looking at you, Calais Campbell, still playing for the Miami Dolphins. I'm looking at you, Jadeveon Clowney, still playing for the Carolina Panthers. Like, what are you doing? It's so dumb. Anyway, I just had to rant about that for a second.
Chase Young with the Saints.
Yeah.
Like that one is a shock. Like, so I think Josina Anderson had it at like 340. It was like the Saints are done making moves. And I'm like, why? Like get a 7th for him. Get something for him. I think that, heck, I'll throw this out there with Jonathan Jones and the Patriots. You're talking about a veteran corner. The Commanders were in the corner market. Like, they might not have made that splash for Lattimore if they could have gotten Jonathan Jones for a 6th rounder. I'd rather have a 6th round pick than nothing. And you could say, oh, well, the compensatory selection and the process. If you're bad, you should be active in free agency that offseason. And I do think that that's part of it is, look, the Bengals don't make another move. And I wanted them to get Azeez Ojulari. I thought it made a lot of sense. He's represented by former Bengal John Thornton. I like the fit. He brought some juice to the Giants pass rush this year, 6 sacks. To me, it seems like he's figured it out a bit. And we'll see if that continues. But the Giants don't move him. And apparently the asking price was too high. There was a dumb report out there that the asking price was a 2nd. And I don't believe that.
That's literally a fake news account.
No, that's what I'm saying. But people shared that and pretended like, and it's just not. But I do think the asking price was probably a 4th. And I would understand why the Bengals wouldn't give up a fourth for Azeez Ojulari. I
Yeah.
would. I thought, oh, well, maybe you could get him for a fifth, certainly a sixth. In my overall takeaway here, when I see, I'm just thinking of the guy from Arden Key. Arden Key doesn't get moved, right? You see Zadarius Smith get moved, and that would have been a trade I would have loved for the Bengals to make. I don't think they even reached out to the Browns, and maybe it's because of the division about that. But regardless, you win the deadline well ahead of the deadline, because you know who I think the best team, or one of the best teams that got better at the deadline was? It's the Kansas City Chiefs. Did they make a move at the deadline? No, they made their moves weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, and 1 week ago. Like Josh Uche for a 6th round pick is better than maybe any of the other pass rushing deals. And you could argue Zadarius Smith, I guess, but like that is something to take note of next year that I'm certainly going to note, because for whatever reason, the price goes up and you can't be late. You don't want to be up against the deadline. And then people ask for, these teams ask for more than they should, or they get tight, whatever the case is. Man, Josh Uche for a 6th, I would do that so easily right now. And instead, the Bengals don't address defense. And I know a lot of people are disappointed, and I totally get it. And by the way, the Preston Smith deal, I would have done that. It's a 7th round pick. It's a 7th round pick, Jake. Why not?
Yeah, I don't have a great answer. I don't think Preston Smith is some great player, but I also don't think Azeez Ojulari is some great player. I would not have gone higher than a 5th. No way. I wouldn't even feel great about trading a 5th for him. I know that he has the sack numbers and he has some athleticism to him, but even if you go back and watch his game against the Bengals where he had some production, a lot of that is not him necessarily creating for himself. While I would have welcomed the addition, Arden Key, more interesting to me. Calais Campbell, I said this yesterday. Calais Campbell was the guy that I would have focused on the hardest, but I guess Miami wasn't interested in moving him, or the asking price was too high, or whatever it is. And some of this is not all on the Bengals. As you said, James, perhaps the asking prices around the league are just too high, and teams are stubborn, and GMs want to try to salvage their jobs, or coaching staffs, or whatever it is, don't want to trade away some of their good players on expiring deals because they want to have some bright spot. There's a locker room presence, there's leadership, whatever those reasons may be. At the same time, we don't know exactly what went down, other than reports all day were that the Bengals were trying to find additional help on the defensive side of the ball, and they were unable to get it done. So whether or not that's because teams' asking prices were too high, or the Bengals just weren't willing to step up and find the compensation that they needed to find to make the football team better, the Bengals didn't get the deal done ultimately. And now we're going to be talking about waiver wires and veteran street free agents and that sort of stuff for a defense that still needs help. And they just didn't do enough. While the Herbert move is great, it doesn't have anything to do with them not getting things done on the defensive side of the ball. My ultimate conclusion here is that they didn't do enough. And it was very clear yesterday what they could have done to make the team better today.
Yeah, I totally agree. And in my last thing that I would say is what were they talking about? Corner, defensive line. And I do believe that they were trying. I do. And so trying is relative. Maybe they made ridiculous offers for, whatever, right? Whatever. I don't know. But who were we talking about in the offseason? The same guy that you've mentioned on every podcast we've done trade deadline wise, Calais Campbell, right? Would they have needed a corner if they had just signed Stephon Gilmore when he was available? When we were talking about signing Stephon Gilmore and Calais Campbell? That is the thing that irks me here. It doesn't have to be this, we'll make 8 trades before the deadline, but you had obvious needs and you've had them for months. And so this isn't a culmination of the past 2 weeks where a couple injuries happened. No, the running back trade was that, because then you suddenly had this void.
But even running back, we're talking about, go get another guy. We were talking about that in the offseason too.
Oh, no doubt, because it was literally the worst depth in the league behind those two guys, behind Moss and Brown. Like, that's not a new narrative either. You're right. And so it's like, damn, man, like Calais Campbell should just be in stripes. Stephon Gilmore was just out there and is playing well. And Gilmore would be starting for you, and Campbell would be your third best defensive lineman, not tackle, just to be clear.
Maybe
You just
second,
feel
to
so
be
much.
honest, maybe.
Maybe second. I was just giving BJ Hill some credit there, but yeah, maybe
It's close. It's close. So, I mean, BJ's having a good season, but Calais Campbell is too.
And so that's the frustrating part to me is it's all right. Well, this was your chance to kind of right that wrong, and you didn't. And so now what? Now where do they go? And maybe that's what we do next. I know we were planning on discussing some of the Ravens, and we can do that. But where does this defense go now that they haven't made a trade to upgrade it? You know, Lou Anarumo was probably pounding the table. I would imagine he is. He wins those draft war room arguments, I think, plenty of time. So where do they go? We'll go there, and we'll discuss Thursday night football coming up next. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook for a reason, because you can wager on Bengals and Ravens Thursday night football, where the Bengals are not only on the road, not only playing on a short week, but they are underdogs against the Baltimore Ravens. And for my money, the Ravens are the best team in the AFC North as of right now. The Bengals can change that. Maybe you think that they're going to upset the Baltimore Ravens. Well, you can get in on the action right now with FanDuel. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, if you live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you make your bets. It's that simple. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook for a reason. And right now at FanDuel.com, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Again, that's FanDuel.com, where you'll get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel.com, official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
By not making a trade for help on defense, where do they go? Well, I mentioned potentially some veteran street free agents out there. That's an option. They can scour the waiver wire as weeks go. They could have done that at any point. That doesn't uniquely change. All that changes now, they can't acquire players that are on other teams via trade. It also means that the Bengals will be relying on second half leaps from some players that they may or may not get them from, because that's the way the league works. But they're looking for steps and improvement from Miles Murphy, from Chris Jenkins, from McKinley Jackson on the defensive line, even from Joseph Osai, continuing to earn praise from Lou Anarumo on Tuesday, but obviously has some work to do to get back to the level that we thought he would be at, at this point in his career in general. In addition to that, in the secondary, you've got Cam Taylor-Britt, DJ Turner, and Jordan Battle earning a bigger role. Can those guys continue or find steps into the right direction after the roller coasters for some of them throughout this season? And that doesn't even mention the offense, where they're dealing with injuries to T. Higgins and now Zach Moss and Orlando Brown. So I don't really see the clear path to a talent injection at this point, right? Any street free agent out there, it's hard to imagine that those are making monumental impacts. And otherwise, you're banking on in-season development, which is tough. So what else are we talking about here, James, when we're talking about where they go from here? It's an unclear picture, I would say.
Well, you're banking real quick. Would you have done Aziz Ojulari and Joseph Osai, or Joseph Osai and a fifth for Aziz Ojulari?
Like I said, when we were talking about Ojulari, for me, a fifth is rich already. But at that point, do you have a need for Osai when you have that other guy? I don't know. That doesn't really change the calculus for me too much in that perspective, I guess. But a fifth by itself, for me personally, is as high as I would have gone for Ojulari.
Okay. So you would have said no if they said throw in Osai to get it done.
Well, like I said, that wouldn't necessarily make a difference to me. Like, it helps.
So you would have done
money.
it.
Yeah. Like if I would do a fifth, I feel like Osai doesn't make much of a difference in that world, because Ojulari is probably taking Osai snaps.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious how, because anyways, yeah, part of it was like the Giants were that they needed a reliable edge or something. So you could just say that. Anyways, I was just curious. No, they're banking on Miles Murphy. That's what this is. They're banking on Miles Murphy to be a first round edge rusher that develops, and it better start now. It's got to start now. I need to see Miles Murphy make an impact on Thursday night football. I need to start to see these, and we've seen some flashes from Chris Jenkins, but you almost, and you could look at the PFF numbers or whatever. I can't really count, and I know it counts against the Raiders, but they were so beaten to crap in their offensive line room that I don't know what's real and how many of those guys are preseason guys for the Raiders that they're playing against. And so that's what this is, though. I mean, you're not finding a pass rusher with juice on the street right now. You were 4 months ago when we said we signed Calais Campbell. Not now. And so Myles Murphy has got to be that guy. I don't think Joseph Osai is. Maybe he is. Maybe he ends up being that guy and has a great second half of the year. But to me, this can still work if Myles Murphy continues to develop in a fast way. Now, this can't be his pass rush percentage went up his pressure percentage went up a half a point. No, we got to start to notice 99 and notice him early and often. And I think that's got to start on Thursday night. And hopefully it does. He's got talent and he's got athleticism, but those pass rush moves, the instincts, all of those things, I think are things that you need to see develop. And like I said, Thursday night is huge. And so finding a way to get to Lamar, it's a must for this defense.
And not just get to him, but get him to the ground, something they really struggled with the last time these teams played. And it's not only Murphy, to be fair. Like, yeah, that's a big one. He was a first-round pick. They need him to play like a first-round pick, and he's shown at times in his rookie year and even this year that those flashes are there, that the ability is there, that the get-off is there, that the athleticism is there. Just needs to put it together a little bit more consistently than he has. Has an opportunity this week. Short week, right? We've talked a lot about how difficult it is to come off of a short week, go on the road in your division. I think Paul Daniel Jr. had the stat that since 2009, AFC North teams on the road on Thursday Night Football in short weeks haven't won a game. 2019. I might have said 2009. But this week, if you're spelling Sam Hubbard, Myles Murphy, you have an opportunity against Roger Rosengarten, who's maybe the worst pass protecting offensive lineman on this Baltimore Ravens team.
Take Hubbard's job. Like, people are like, oh, well, we want Myles to get all those Hubbard snaps. No. Hey, Myles, take Sam's job. You don't just get jobs. Go take it. Like, that would and should be the mentality, right? Because we always see it the other way. Like, oh, well, this young guy needs to get in and get more. No, go take it. And it's not like, and you're right, there's been some flashes, but he hasn't taken the job, right? No. And so this is a week, you're right, where man, oh man, a guy who he's played against plenty. You're talking about ACC now. I think, Clemson, Louisville, Myles Murphy knows what it's like to go up against Lamar Jackson. Even though they didn't play in college, I know that he had studied the Louisville stuff. Some I've talked to him about it. And so he's familiar with Lamar, even though he didn't play Lamar until he got to the NFL.
One interesting note here, talking about taking jobs, and I think I mentioned this earlier this week. Joseph Osai did outsnap Myles Murphy this week, which is an interesting side note. But again, Roger Rosengarten being an opportunity for Myles Murphy this week. And like I said, it's not just him. It is the rest of these young players in the secondary, including Jordan Battle, including Cam Taylor-Britt, including DJ Turner. It is these young guys on the interior, McKinley Jackson and Chris Jenkins. And we'll see what the status of BJ Hill is this week. But such a big test coming up after the way things went the first time these teams played, where they had a couple stops early and then they let it get away from them late, and the interception in the fourth quarter was killer. If the defense has another game like that, it's going to be really tough, especially with not knowing what's going on with Orlando Brown and T. Higgins, who we don't have an injury report yet. They don't practice until late on Tuesday, and we're recording before that, after the trade deadline, but before they practice. They could be shorthanded again this week, James, and so you might need more complementary football if you can't get one or both of those guys back this week. And so you're looking at all these young players on defense where they didn't make a move to add help, or couldn't make a move to add help, but ultimately didn't make a move to add help. And now you're banking on the guys they have. And honestly, it's really hard not to be cynical about that. I hope that they're right and these guys develop, but we've seen them time and time again say we like the guys in the building. And we've seen that bite them in the butt and force them to make moves in the offseason when they had the next offseason, or a year too late, when they had opportunities to address some of these things if they were, I think, a little bit more honest about some of the guys in the building a little bit earlier.
Well, that's the theme of this show, right? Is if you sign Gilmore and you sign Campbell, well, we're not really having this conversation as much probably. And instead they get to teams and then we're talking about, oh, well, you should trade for a corner. You should trade for this defensive lineman, or you should. They address running back, and we'll see if these other positions develop. Who knows? Maybe they end up signing someone free agent wise. But again, even that, and if they do that, I'll be like, well, they were a free agent for a reason. Why didn't you just sign them 2 months ago and put them on the practice squad if you had an interest in them? And I said that about Lawrence Guy. I know he's not here anymore, but like, if you were open to signing a 34-year-old, why wasn't he on the practice squad in August or on the roster in August, and you keep him around on the practice squad and you say, hey, we think we're going to need you because of that, because of the depth issues. And it's one of those things where you can't react 2 weeks too late, especially now when you're 4-5. So must win on Thursday. There's no doubt about that. We'll see if they can get it done.
And we'll have more time to talk about this upcoming Thursday night football game with the Baltimore Ravens. We'll be crossing over with Locked On Ravens tomorrow. You'll hear from us after the game, of course, as well. We haven't even mentioned that reacted to the Bengals getting flexed against the Los Angeles Chargers. And we won't probably have an opportunity to do that until Sunday because this is what happens on a short week. There's only so much that we can get to. And that wraps up the trade deadline, where the ultimate conclusion is not enough done. And now we're talking about a short week where we're hoping they can catch guys up to speed, get guys healthy. And honestly, even if they sign a veteran at this point on a short week in a critical game for their season, it's tough. It's a tough place to be, but we will continue to have you covered.
They're not signing a veteran that hopes Thursday. Yeah.
Like super unlikely, right? We will we'll have you covered here the rest of the way this week. We'll have a little bit more on the Ravens game tomorrow, like I said, with our crossover with Kevin Oestreicher from Locked On Ravens. Then we'll have you covered after the game on Thursday night. Until next time, thanks for listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.